Aloha and welcome to Connection to the Cosmos with your host, me, Dr. Lisa Thompson. And I am so excited to bring my guest on, Barbara Worsley, the East Coast Dragon Lady. So we'll bring her on in just a moment. But first, just a couple of announcements. If you haven't had the opportunity to download my free 20-minute meditative journey to meet your galactic family and guides, make sure you claim that on my website, mysticmanta.com. It's right at the top. You can't miss it. For those of you that want to do a deep dive journey into galactic connection, come see me at my Galactic Retreat Experience, September 14th to the 17th, here on the Big Island of Hawaii. It's going to be held in Waikoloa Village. And then if you are visiting the Big Island any other time, then definitely come see me on one of my Big Island UFO tours. Okay, so without further ado, Barbara, hello.
Hello. Hi.
Okay, so let me share some information about you so people can get to know your background.
Mm-hmm.
So Barbara Worsley was born in London, England, where she studied nursing and practiced as a registered nurse. She moved to the U.S. in 1991, where she maintained caregiving and management roles for the majority of her career. As a single mother of two teenage boys after her divorce, Barbara worked two jobs for many years until returning to her true spiritual path after life happened, as she affectionately puts it. She is a natural healer, Reiki and polarity therapist, mind-body spirit practitioner, and master toe reader are a few of the many modalities that she currently practices. Best known for her ability to channel, Barbara connects with ascended masters, Archangels, Galactics, and Dragons to bring messages of comfort to those awakening to the new golden age. Merlin has been her guide for over 30 years and plays a main role in connecting her to those who wish to receive messages. She is now affectionately known as the East Coast Dragon Lady and helps bring forth messages of love, light, and comfort. Well, welcome, Barbara.
Thank you.
I cannot wait to jump in here. So, I would love for you to share with me and the audience, like how you grew up first and foremost. Like, was it a spiritual or religious household or something else, so we can understand your spiritual journey?
Right. So, I mean, obviously, with my accent, I grew up in England. So I was born just outside London. So I was born in South London, and I was brought up in a household that my parents did not have any religious beliefs. And I've often told people that for me, it was somewhat of a blessing because by the time I was in school, I was fascinated by religion. I had neighbors that were Catholic and I would go along with them because I wanted to see what it was like. And throughout my life, I've met people of different religions and was fascinated by, their culture and their traditions. But it left me much more open-minded so nothing was like off limits with me when it's come to religion. I'm still fascinated by people's traditions.
Okay, well, excellent. Well, so you started your career as a nurse and then you ultimately got trained in some of these other healing modalities. So what made you decide to go that more spiritual path?
Right. So when I was working in England, I was actually what is equivalent to a visiting nurse here. And I remember a patient that I had who actually had MS and couldn't really move very much. She was always telling me that I was a healer. And like every time I would go in, she goes, you're a healer. That's why you're a nurse, because you put hands on people. And then she would tell me all her stories. And I was really, that was in the mid to late 80s. And I was like, it didn't really mean much to me. I was a practical nurse. And it wasn't till I came to the USA, and I want to say probably a few years before I got divorced, that I was looking to do, I didn't work here as a nurse. It was just too complicated. And I was doing sort of skincare and nails. And somebody told me that our teacher was a Reiki master. And I remember saying, I don't know what Reiki is, but I need to do that. And that sort of has been my theme ever since. Like somebody tells me something, and I'm like, I don't know, I need to do it. And I signed up for Reiki, and it literally has taken me on a path of finding more. I was fascinated by that, did all the levels. I was actually I thought I was going to be a massage therapist because I thought that was the next step. And the school that I went to actually did polarity therapy. And
what is polarity therapy?
Well, it's similar, it's hands-on healing, but it's, and I can't really remember the whole thing, but it's more about moving energy through your body by using hands. Whereas Reiki, you're accessing a higher power that comes through you and you're attuned to it. This was more about meridians, and definitely it was really very much about where you put your hands allowed the energy to flow. But again, that was something I wasn't looking for, and I went to that, and I realized that just the hands-on and the healing, and again learning where the source of energy comes from, was what made me go down these different modalities. And when I was doing, and again, this was in the mid-90s, I remember a couple of friends and I had a small practice, and we kept saying, we're like too early. People aren't ready for hands-on healing, especially the area we were living in. It was like, so, but it was still a good training.
Tell people where you live, what area.
So I actually live in the northeast of the United States, and that's how I got my name. So I live on the east coast of the United States, and I'd found myself saying a lot, or when I started doing like reels or little snippets of things, I would say, oh, I'm Barbara, I live on the east coast, or this is Barbara. And one day I was on some Facebook group, and there were several Barbaras, and somebody said, well, which Barbara are you? And I said, oh, I'm the East Coast Dragon Lady. And they all said, oh my goodness, we love that. Like, you need to keep that name. And it sort of stuck because I'm on the East Coast, I'm Dragon Lady.
I love it. Well, so you did Reiki, you learned the polarity therapy, and then was the toe reading next?
No, so then there was this gap. As I said, the gap was I got divorced when my kids were in their early teens, and life really did take over. So I'd done a lot of the learning Reiki and polarity and other things, and life really happened. I mean, it was like, and everybody knows what it's like when you've got teenagers. I mean, my life was taken up with, driving them places and I was working 2 jobs. So I'd found, so I was working during the day, evenings, weekends, and I sort of stepped away from it. That's really what it felt like. And then, things progressed in my life where I didn't need to work 2 jobs. And then I landed up buying the condo that I live in now. And a job where I didn't have to work, weekends and stuff. And then it was 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, I decided to step back in, but I wasn't quite sure what was I going to do. It was like, I knew I needed to go to something spiritual. And actually it was during COVID, I think we've all got that, like it was definitely during COVID. And how many years ago was that? And I found some online communities that I joined, and then really started finding sort of that this was what I wanted, but I didn't know what this was. And that was when I first really probably realized that I channeled.
Okay. I was going to ask. So Merlin was the first one.
Yeah. Yeah. So
when did you discover that relationship with Merlin?
Well, that was definitely just after I got divorced and while I was doing Reiki. I encountered him. So I remember I was walking in the woods. I just got divorced, and I was looking at all these beautiful colors on this walk. And I was like, why have I not seen these colors before? And I was like, obviously in my head having a conversation. And then I heard this voice say, because things are different. And I sort of looked around and it was like, of course. And then out the corner of my eye, I caught what I'd always thought Merlin would look like, the stereotypical pointed hat, very long grey beard, long hair. And he was just sort of out of my side of my vision. I never really saw him face on, but I was very aware of him. And he had his big staff. And he just started talking to me. And I was like, okay, see Merlin. But that was his first time. And then he would often come and sort of, and as I now realize, he helped connect me to lots of different things. And even today, I mean, he's now stepped back in, and actually with his wife, which again, a lot of people are like, Merlin had a wife. So that was another one of my aha moments.
Okay. Well, do you remember what his first message to you was?
It was more about confirming that I was seeing life differently. And he said, of course you're seeing the colors. Life is different. You are seeing life differently. And that I think was my biggest surprise, because it made sense, right? I said to people as well, once I got divorced, I felt like I'd been shot out into the universe, like I'd been held down, and then I was like out there. So that was like the first, and he was very gentle. He didn't like come in with lots of messages. It was more like, I'm here if you need me. I'm going to guide you. And again, I probably didn't really think of it as a big deal. It was like, okay, Merlin's there, but he's always been there.
Okay, so when you mentioned the channeling just starting to happen.
Yes.
Just in the last couple of years. So how did that come about?
Well, probably I was channeling before, but I didn't recognize it as channeling. So I used to do what I called automatic writing. I would get that sort of feeling, or sometimes I would sit down and say, okay, who's there? And I would start writing. And while I was writing, I would often ask, so who is this? And I sometimes didn't know till the end. And then a lot of times it was ascended masters. And they would usually come in sort of like poetry form or some sort of flow, with sometimes a big message, sometimes just, love and light. And, we're worried about Earth, and, very similar, but very, very heart-centered messages. But then there was the day that I was, again, having the feeling there was a message coming through. And I think I'd had one from Merlin. And I was writing, and I was very aware it was different. And Merlin is, he always talks in what he calls old English. He's of the old ways, he always says, like the old. So he often says things differently. And this was similar, but it was definitely not Merlin. So I'd asked, who is this? And she signed it Gwendolyn. And as I wrote it, it was like the old way of writing Gwendolyn. And I was like, well, who's Gwendolyn? And she said, I'm Merlin's wife. So the first thing I did was Google it.
Okay.
Google.
Yeah.
It actually said Merlin did have a wife called Gwendolyn, spelt the same way. So she tells me that her job with me is to walk the path with me. She's like a sister. She says she holds my hand on my path, and he's that Merlin is there to connect me, and she's there to hold my hand. So they sort of walk on the path with me.
Yeah. So when the Ascended Masters were coming to you, was it specific Ascended Masters or just as a collective?
Usually specific ones. Kuan Yin was big, and she's just come back. Saint Germain. I mean, some of them were like, who? Saint Germain? I'd have to go and look them up. Not really. Who else did I? There was Kuan Yin. It had come to me, but there was quite a few, and some just with one message, and others would more often. And Kuan Yin seems to like come in, and then she leaves, and then she comes back again. So right now she's actually, and she will tell me or guide me to something to read, which is actually her cards. So her her transformation. It's like a journal, but it's very pretty.
Okay. So then, so you've got the Cinemasters, Gwendolyn, Merlin,
So,
and then how did the dragons and the Galactics come into play?
so again, I did one of my, so I remember that, so I joined actually Sunny Dawn Johnson's community, and I was like in full flow of it all. And she was doing the Mind, Body, Spirit Practitioners class, and it was the first one that was going to be in person after COVID. But when I signed up for it, I hadn't realized it was in person because it was like towards the end of COVID. And I was like, okay, so I guess I'm going to Arizona. So when I was getting ready for that, I was getting a lot of messages that this was going to be big. This was going to be the start of something big, because it was right at the beginning of the year, 2 years ago. And sure enough, as I took off, like they were like, get out your journal. And I just wrote and wrote and wrote, like most of the flight, 6-hour flight. And just the whole 4 days were just like that. Lots of aha moments. Again, like I did with you, I was told that I needed to share what I was giving. And I wasn't the sort of person that would say, oh, by the way, during your class, I've actually got to give you this message. But that's, again, what I did. And it wasn't till I came back, and I want to say it was like probably 3 or 4 months after I came back. So it was sometime in the middle of like March or April. I was again one of Sunny's classes where you can ask Spirit for a message, or she would give you one. And I was just like, so am I on the right path? And I was waiting, and it was till right at the very end before she ended. And then she said, Barbara, why are you not using your gifts? And I was like, and she said, she turned to the class and said, Barbara channels Ascended Masters. And I was like, I channel? But the minute I said, I am a channel, or I channel, that completely changed. I mean, my automatic writing was channeling,
Right.
but then it was much richer once I actually admitted out loud that I was channeling.
Yeah,
yes.
That's actually same for me. When I finally owned it,
Right.
then it actually flowed. And
right.
just came.
Yeah. So it literally went quickly. And so Merlin is my connector. And so he was connecting me to these Ascended Masters. And I didn't know the reason. And I kept asking, what's the reason? And he just kept connecting me. So I had all these experiences with Ascended Masters. And then last summer, it was just last summer, I was out walking locally. And I remember hearing, look up. And I looked up, and there were dragons in the sky. And I was like, I was actually speechless. I was like, I'm seeing dragons. And they were like diving and in the clouds. So, of course, I took my camera out. I'm like, I have to get some of these pictures. And it was fascinating to me. I'm like, dragon, why am I seeing dragons? And there was a probably about 24-hour, I didn't get any messages. And as I was talking more, because I was telling people, like, I've got sky dragons, and they started communicating me and saying, yeah, we're dragons, we're here. And I'm like, okay, and what reason? And they were like, we are connected to Ascended Masters, which was why I was being connected with Ascended Masters. And then I started looking for other people and asking people about, like, do you know anything about dragons? And a lot of people just would scratch their head and say, dragons? No, what are you talking about? Or dragons are myths, is a lot of what I would get. Like, yeah, they're not real. And I'm like, okay. I mean, now they tell me, yes, we've been here since the beginning of time. So we're very old and we're very wise, which is, of course, Merlin is very old and very wise. And then while having connected with the dragons, not long after that, I started to get messages from specific galactics, which at the time they were telling. So Commander Ashtar was my first connection, and there was a lot of talking around star people, galactic command, the brother and sisterhood of light. I mean, and all this was happening really fast. Like I said earlier, like literally ask me next week and something has changed. And it was coming in fast. And I hadn't even looked into any of that. Like what started me looking into like ET things, because Commander Ashtar was explaining why they were there, and they were there to rescue us and keep all of the other bad people away from Earth, and that's really how I got into that, was by getting those messages and actually getting those channeled messages from Ashtar, and then
real quick, was that coming through writing, or were you speaking?
Mainly through writing. Okay. I hadn't really sort of channeled. Again, when you're doing it at home on your own, I don't always think of doing that until just recently, actually, since just before your classes started, I got a message as I went to sit down to write, and I was told, you can't write this down. You need to speak for me. And that was my connection from Andromeda, whose name is Harmini. And she will not let me write anything down. I can write little notes, but I can't write down what she says. She says I have to use my voice to channel. And so I practiced some of that. And then, of course, in your class the other day, I channeled her as well.
Yeah. So what did it feel like to actually vocally channel?
It felt sort of normal. I mean, it didn't feel unusual. It felt okay. I mean, I know you channel as well, and it's sort of like what's being said, but you don't really have control over it. It's just sort of coming. That's the only way I can describe it. It's like it just flows. It's not like I thought I would have to think about what she was saying, but it just comes out. And sometimes, it sounds a little bit different to your own voice, but often it sounds just like you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as far as the dragons, like before you experienced your sky dragons, were you a dragon person?
No. No. And that's what sort of surprised me. And then, of course, probably like a lot of people, I didn't really. So I found some dragon cards, so oracle cards. And even though I said I was not going to be an oracle person, I've now got a lot of oracle cards because, I like the Ascended Masters. And there's two people that have, who are pretty, I guess, known, Diana Cooper and Caroline Mitchell. Interestingly, they're both from England, but they write and talk a lot about dragons and connecting with dragons. And then other people here have kindly connected me with a few other people. One is Kevin Humphreys, who's in England, who's actually putting on the Dragon Thunder, the International Dragon Thunder, which is like, I'm sort of in awe of the fact that I'm going to be a speaker with Caroline Mitchell and Diana Cooper.
That's amazing. Yes. Well, and you well-deserved.
Yeah, thank you. But I think what's interesting is that, and again, Kevin, I was actually, I believe it was Tammy actually connected us and said, hey, I think you'd be interested in this guy. And we've sort of connected over Facebook, and he literally like messaged me. It was probably like a few weekends ago, and said, hey, I've had this idea. What do you think of getting a whole group of people together and putting on a conference? And I said, oh, that's great. Let me know how I can help. And he said, well, actually, you're the first person I've asked.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, right. And then he was like, so what time do you want to speak? And then it's literally floats it. And he knows, because he knows the he knows of them. So yeah. it'd be interesting. And it's so his dragons were the ones that told him that he needed to pull this together, because there's not been a gathering of like humans and dragons.
Okay.
So that's his mission.
That's so cool. So when is that summit going to be?
That's July 2nd. It's actually on my website. It was going to be for like 4 hours. I think it might be a whole day now. I think so. Here for us, it's going to, or on the East Coast, it will be midday till 5 or 6 p.m. Kevin right now has just gone to Peru. He's on a whole trip to Peru. So when he comes, but it's not until, so we've still got a couple of months. And so Australia, UK, United States, and maybe Ireland. So it's truly international.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, so it's going to be live then?
It's like, but it'll be recorded. He's going to record it as well. Yeah, because I realized here for us, that's going to be like July 4th weekend, right? Even would it be Monday or Tuesday? But yes, it'll be recorded as well, which would be, interesting. Yeah, so that's exciting that, you connect with people over something that a few years ago people would have gone, dragons?
Right.
Yeah. Actually, so my brother still lives in England, and I mentioned to him a couple of things, and he was like, okay. I could see he was like, And then the village that he lives in, he's just moved down to southwest of England. They went into the village for coffee, and there was an unveiling of a dragon. And he was like, he sent me the picture, and he's like, I don't know what's going on, but there's a dragon now in our village. And I'm like, you're right in the middle of dragon country. He's in, the moors in England. And so apparently they wanted to cut down this tree, or they had to take this tree down, but they wanted to do something with it. So they carved it into a dragon.
Okay. Beautiful. Well, and we have that in common. I work with dragons as well.
Right.
Not usually consciously. It's more in my astral traveling, but I definitely have a dragon connection.
Right.
And then before we got on, you were sharing with me that you just had a past life regression session.
Yeah.
With Jerry Rohrbach, and you had a mermaid experience.
Yes.
Which I also know we have that in common. So share about the mermaid experience.
Yes. So again, not anything that I would do. Somebody had said mermaid. So I do know that I have, that I certainly have been in Atlantis and Lemuria over the years. I've certainly had memories of that. And I think this was, and it was only yesterday, but as you know, when you do past life regression, it's like, when did it happen? But I remember I was in a particular lifetime where I just sort of like faded away. And then I was in a between life, and she was sort of prompting me like, well, what does it look like? And I was like, it's sort of cloudy and murky, and I can't really quite see what it is. There was sort of like a veil. And she was like, well, move towards it, keep moving towards it. And then I suddenly realized that I was in the ocean, and it was warm, and I could see dolphins and whales, and there was stingrays. And I was like, but I don't know who I am. Because she was like, well, who are you? And I'm like, I don't know, but I'm in the water and I can breathe. And then I was like, oh, wait. And I looked down and I could see that I had fins. And I was like, oh, I'm a mermaid. It was pretty cool. And then I was sort of swimming around. So that was a between life that I was a mermaid.
Yeah. Well, so, and then you were, we've had so many different conversations the last, however many weeks. And so there was a number that came to you.
Yes.
So to share that story.
Yes. So this is like, I've not really told anybody about it. So I kept getting a repeating number in my head that wouldn't go away. And it was like every time it was like constant, and it was 15992, and it was 15992, 159. And I was like, I've never had numbers. And I know people often say they know when they're getting, I mean, I know if I'm getting a download because I get like a clicking, and I'm like, is this a message? What is it? And I know I messaged you and I messaged a couple other people. I'm like, what does this mean? And some people were saying, oh, you might be getting an activation, you might be getting this. And you'd said, sit with it. And I was like, oh, I'll wait and see. But I was still wanting to do something. Like, so I was trying to figure it out. And I just wrote out the alphabet and then wrote the letter, corresponding letters. And it spelled out AEIIB. And I was like, oh, Abe. And the minute I said Abe, I heard this voice say, yeah, that's me. I'm a galactic dragon, and I'm all the way out here in the dark side. I was like, the dark side? And he's like, nobody has claimed me. And I could see him. And this is the first time I've really seen a dragon, but he was more like an octopus. And I was like, so that was a bit confusing because he wasn't a dragon. He was like the dragon face, but he had like tentacles. And that was sort of it. And then I kept the next morning, I kept getting the word Proteus. And I knew it meant something, but I didn't know what it was. So again, thank you, Google. I Googled it. And one of the first things that came up was that Proteus was a moon for Neptune, which sort of made sense to me. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, Neptune's way out there. It's a dark, it's like, and here I'm in the dark, he's telling me. And Proteus is a misshapen moon. And then as soon as I connected with him again, he told me he was a shape-shifting dragon. And he then appeared as more of a normal dragon. But he has these piercing green eyes that you could like see them like from miles away. So he was excited that I'd actually figured out the transmission. And he said, I knew somebody would figure it out eventually. And that's why I kept sending the number for you to figure out. And previous to that, I'd actually got a sort of a message from the Galactic Dragons, the collective, saying that the work that I was doing was nice, pulling dragon cards and talking about dragons, and that it's very nice and beautiful what you do, but there are a lot of dragons that haven't been claimed, and they're galactic dragons, and you need to work with them. You need to find your own brood, was what they actually told me.
Okay. So how does one claim a dragon?
It was more, I think he felt like I'm all the way out here and nobody, I think like when I look at like people like Caroline Miller and things, they often, the dragon came and talked to me, and then somebody draws a beautiful picture, and then they have an oracle deck and they have a book and they talk about their dragon. So that's how I felt that claiming the dragon is. Because I've also been told that so there is sort of a collective of dragons that speak. And then there are individual dragons that sometimes will talk, especially if they're your dragons, that they want you to communicate with them.
Yeah.
So this was, again, all new to me, this like connecting with somebody that's like, hey, I'm out here. So it was, again, I don't really know a whole lot about the planets and where they are, but it's surprising what I learn from listening to them, that they give me information. And then it's sort of really cool then when you look it up and it's actually true.
Right.
I get really excited and I'm like, I'm not making this up.
Yeah, it's very validating for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, and you said that Abe, the Neptunian dragon, came and shapeshifted into a butterfly today.
Oh, yeah. So this morning when I was like deciding, what am I going to wear? You know what we do? Like, what should I wear? I'm going to be on a podcast. And he actually came and as a dragon butterfly, and he went into this huge butterfly dragon because I had butterflies on my shirt.
I love it.
And that he wanted to be there. Yeah. So, and you know, I see dragons because people often say, well, how do they're like ascended masters. They're a high vibration, a very high vibration. And but they're coming more into our frequencies because more people are waking up to dragons.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting. People that, I mean, just, I can think of two people. Jerry was one that she's like, I don't know why I was told to connect with you about dragons.
I love it. So when they're coming in, do you feel the energy differently between an ascended master versus an archangel versus the dragons versus your Andromedan?
Right. Yes. Yeah, I guess there is a difference. I mean, what I've been told is that I don't have to do a lot of like going into a deep meditative state. It's almost like I get a nudge or I get that feeling that somebody wants to talk to me or and there's a difference in that, a slight difference in the energy. And I think it's probably the frequency that I feel the difference. Yeah. So I'm sort of more aware. And now because I've made those connections, they're easier to connect to because they will say who they are rather than leave me guessing. And it's usually for a reason, whether it's just because I've asked them to come. I love actually what I remember Kevin, who is the dragon whisperer in England, he always said, if you've got a dragon or a dragon team, nobody messes with you, right? And I found that since I've actually embraced my dragons, that's actually turned out to be true.
Okay,
in my everyday life.
I need to call on my dragons more.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, and I was just saying this yesterday, was that I remember somebody saying years ago that our angels are sitting around going, why aren't they asking? Why are they like struggling and not saying, can you help me? And it's the same with the dragons. They're like, we're right here, just ask. It's not complicated. And that's what I was saying, was that so they told me that because my practice of grounding myself every day, and I do it every day, it's a bit like brushing your teeth now. And that's been consistent for probably about 2 or 3 years. That I feel like I need to be firmly grounded, that they said because I've been doing that, and the deeper I go, the higher I can reach vibrationally. So by regular practice was what allowed me to open up to those higher frequencies.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, and I think people forget that they really do need to very much ground themselves here to
Yes.
not feel like they're going to lose themselves, I guess.
Right. And actually, when I usually talk to people about that, they're like, oh, you're right. Yes, I don't do that, because they do everything else. Like all wonderful, if you have rituals in the morning, whatever. And the one thing they forget to do is to ground themselves. And for me now, and I'm a Pisces, so I can very easily just float off out there. Very easily. I really need to be firmly rooted. And it's really quick. I mean, I remember when people started talking about, you've got to have a ritual, you've got to do this. I would be like, I haven't got time. But it is just like cleaning your teeth. It's like, I've got to do this, this, and this, and then I can do my day, right?
Yeah, beautiful. So as far as the messages that they are sharing through you, can you give some examples of what the dragons are saying versus like what Kamini is sharing?
Yeah, so there always seems to be a similar theme. And that's why, so I've met other people that either are connected to dragons, and there's people out there that they're more got to have fighting dragons, or their dragons go out and do all this. And I'm like, oh, I don't have those type of dragons. Mine are very peaceful. Like they even if they do breathe fire, it's not to harm. It's so I have one of my dragons who's a fire dragon, like clears the lower energies, but it's not to burn. It's just to clear away. So I've completely forgotten what you asked me now, because I was just going down that.
I just wondered if they had any messages.
Oh, like messages. Yeah.
they're here to share.
Yeah. So the dragons say they're here, that we're waking up to them because we need them here to help us here on Earth. Mother Gaia is, again, because I ground myself in her and I give her thanks every day, and we energy exchange. I bring the energy in and I take some of her energy. She talks a lot about everyday things, about how she is feeling very sad about what's going on Earth. And then when volcanoes erupt, that's her boiling over. So I get a lot of those sort of information from Mother Gaia. And oftentimes the dragons and the ascended masters will refer to Gaia as, she's sad, we need to take care of her, we're destroying things. Sometimes it's themes that are out there, or even before, like all the flooding. There was definitely, I was getting some messages around, there's going to be destruction, and, because we're on fire.
Okay.
So I think, and dragons, a bit like a lot of the Galactics, they're more worried about Earth. And I've certainly had, I'm trying to think certainly things about why they're there out in outer space protecting us. And I've also had lots of conversations about Earth being an experiment. That we're still in and that we chose to come here as part of the experiment. So there's a lot of similar themes, and that might be because of me, because that it's very heart-centered for me. But I was also told I had to do a lot more work before I could do that. So there is, I think for a lot of us, we need to clear things. And for me, it was a lot around my heart. And also so I discovered in my past life regression, like solar plexus has come up a lot for me. And that was a lot for me was when I was in my mother's womb and how she was feeling, that I absorbed all of that. And it all went in, I actually saw it go into my solar plexus.
Okay.
So that was we've shifted all of that. But I think that's for us to be able to do this work, we have to keep clearing those pathways.
Yes, totally agree. Well, and the more clear that we can be, then we're more of a clear channel as well.
Right. Yeah. So and certainly, like Kuan Yin talks a lot about the heart, and actually, and Harmony as well. One of the things she gave me was that we see from our third eye, but we need to connect that to our heart and our higher heart so that we can see with our heart and not with our head. We've got to see and breathe and speak from our heart, which is hard to do in the world we live in, right?
Yeah, it definitely can be challenging. And yes, she shared that message in our Andromedan session.
Yes. Because that was her gift, was, to connect the third eye to your heart and the heart to your third eye. So, and really don't think with this part. You've got to think with your heart. And I knew that I had to do a lot of that work before I could do this. Well, now I know that retrospectively. I didn't know at the time.
So from your experience in working with the different dragons, do the galactic dragons have different purpose in relation to us than the ones that are here on Earth?
I probably don't know that yet. So what they were telling me was that I was being too generalized. I was just talking generally about dragons, and the fact that I'd got galactic connections, that they wanted me to focus more. And this has only been the last few weeks where they're like, you need to, first of all, they asked me to only talk about one dragon a day, not generalized, and like focus on them. And then they felt that I needed to like pick what I was doing. So, and that's when they told me that they saw me as the, I'm trying to remember the term now, Galactic Dragon Ambassador. So that was the name that they want to give me. So when I was in my past life regression, we asked that question, that is that what my name is, or that's the title they want me to have? And they said yes.
Okay. So Galactic Dragon Ambassador.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that once I do more work with that, I'll probably know more. Yeah.
Okay. So, you've been in the different sessions with me. We've gone through 6 different of the extraterrestrial races. I would love for you to share with the audience your experience with the Lyrans.
Yes. That was, and I still feel them with me. So the Lyrans are cat-like animals. I've always had a love of cats, but that I didn't realize that. I was more of a cat person than a dog person. So it was exciting that we were talking about them. But what I experienced was when we took that step into the room. So you take us through a guided meditation. And I do believe that the more we do it, the more intense that we're getting. And when I walked into the room and sat down, 2 white, it was hard. So first there were 2 white lions, but I realized one was me and one was sitting in front of me. And I could actually feel the fur. And then we kept like shifting. So it was, I was here and then I shifted into the other seat and I realized it was, I was looking at myself. And it was so, I know it, like realizing that I was actually a Lyran, and then there was two very tall white beings behind me as well that were Lyrans, but they told me that I was part of the Lyran family. And I'm trying to remember what the message was, but I know somebody else got it as well.
Yeah, I don't remember, but yes, they got the same message.
Yeah, and everybody had a very similar experience of being a Lyran or being a cat and seeing themselves. And so yeah, they are amazing sessions. I think all of us are like, wow. And I really do, like, the more we've done it, like the more that the higher the vibration seems to get and the more intense everybody's experience has been.
Yeah. Well, and so share your experience with the mantis week.
Oh yes, the mantis was like, I actually felt like I very creeped out. I felt like they were over me, like actually, I don't know why that, but it was, yeah, in the moment, I know there was a message there as well for that. I mean, there's always a message with all of them. But yeah, the mantis were, yeah, that wasn't the favorite of all of them. All of them are fabulous. And just, I think, seeing ourselves as those beings, or some of us just like, oh, was part of my family. But with the Andromedans, they actually said that I was, I know, who was there was another one. Who did we do after the Andromedans? Was
well, so we've done Arcturians, Pleiadians, Sirians, Andromedans, Mantis, and the Lyrans.
Lyrans. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But it certainly, there was a feeling that that was family for me with the Lyrans, that I was on Lyra. Yeah.
Wow. So where do you see yourself headed? I mean, I know, like you're saying, every week things are changing, new things are coming.
Yeah.
So you've got the summit coming up. You've got a book chapter you're working on.
Yes. So yes, I was invited to write, and that was really hard to, as I said, I was like, I knew I sort of had an idea of what I wanted to write about, but then when it flowed, it surprised me what came out. Mm-hmm. So it's about it's about transformation, how we've transformed, and because things keep changing for me, transformational triumphs. I mean, life is like completely different to 25 years ago. And if somebody had said I'd be sitting here talking about dragons and galactics, it'd be, no, that's not right. So I don't know. I still feel like I'm on this adventure because I thought, I mean, I do dragon readings. I find that when I've done energy work, that the dragons are obviously there helping with that. I'm still not quite sure where it's taking me. I'm not sure. So I'll have to come back in 6 months and tell you.
For sure. Well, I mean, it's been quite the journey for you, and
yes,
I mean, has it been challenging for you to accept this role as a channeler, or to like have friends and family members been like, oh, okay, Barbara's crazy now, or are they welcoming, accepting of it? Like, how's that going?
Yeah, I'm sure there is a few people that think that. But overall, I have been surprised at talking about dragons, the number of people that say that they either, I love dragons, oh my goodness, that's so cool, tell me more, rather than going, and I think a lot of people know, but I also work for the Department of Mental Health. So it's like, have I really lost it? I actually don't feel, I think, so I had a separate private, so I had my Facebook page and then I had a private page because I didn't at the time feel like I wanted to share it with like everybody. But somebody mentioned that if you're going to put yourself out there, so like when I got my website, it's like people think you're hiding something if you're not opening, like, why are you hiding that from these people? So I've shared that in my regular Facebook group, and actually several people have asked to join. So they might be people that I've worked with, family. I mean, it's, you know, like most people's Facebook page, they're ex-colleagues or people I've known over the years, people in England. And now I don't worry about that. Before I did, but it was when, and again, the dragons had said, you need to get out in the World Wide Web. You've got to launch yourself. And I do have to give Tammy Cantrell a lot of credit for that. That was just, that's another story where I won a card reading from her because I'd been contributing to her, I'd been commenting. And literally we went from reading my cards to, oh my goodness, you need an Akashic record. We need to go and look in those, which she does. And then while we're doing that, she's like, oh my goodness, like if you're going to be doing podcasts and this, you need a website. And I was like, I know. And she's like, I do that as well. And she did, like literally was all over it and was excited for me. She said, I'm as excited for you as I was for my website. And she did a fabulous job with it. And she keeps me in check when I need things added or if I don't think I can add things. But again, you know, these have been fabulous connections that I've made with people. And they all feel like, even though it's, you know, over, you know, we're all in different parts of the country and sometimes different parts of the world, it does feel genuine.
Yes, we are building a beautiful tribe.
Yes, yes. And again, if we'd talked about that before COVID, I think people would have been like, no, they're just on the other side of the world. We just connect with them. Now I think that brought a lot of different people together.
Yes, for sure. Well, so can you share with the audience what kinds of different services you currently offer besides the dragon readings?
Oh, besides being the dragon lady. So I do still do Reiki. I actually, in one of my many things, I'll take that class, I just did Holy Fire Reiki, which I love. It's more of a community sharing, whereas regular Reiki is more about bringing it in. This you can sort of, it's a really nice energy. I like that. So I'm doing a lot of like distance Reiki. I tend to have a unique way of blending polarity and Reiki together, which my people that taught me years ago would probably be cringing to hear me say that. But to me, it's a mixture of both that I do. And I've realized that when I've done some sessions that I actually I'm channeling. So when I do distance, I'm actually channeling that. I do different dragon card readings. I started off beginning of the year saying, it's 2023, for $23, I'll do 3 cards for you and give you a message. And I found that because of with my channeling that I will often get a message or something will come up specific to that person, which is sort of unique because they're like, how did you know that? I'm like, it's just what came up. I don't know why, the flowers or whatever it was. I recently,
I love my dragon reading that you did for me. So.
Thank you. Yes. And it was just, a little thing, but it sort of got me started on just offering services. I think the biggest one that was the biggest success was Meet Your Dragon Team. And that was again, somebody had said, I just can't connect with dragons. I don't know what it is. Like, could you help me? And while I was doing that, my dragons were like, you could do a dragon team for people because they're different dragons at different times, but you can help people connect to a dragon team. So I've done that for the last 2 months as a special for $50. And different things are unfolding. I'm really not sure what's next.
Okay. Well, so we didn't really talk about the toe reading, but can you just quickly talk about?
Yes. So I was fascinated by toe reading. So it was when I was part of Sonny's community, the 365, she would have guest speakers come in. So Jamie came and talked about toe reading. And I remember thinking, that's fascinating that you can read people's toes and know all that about them. So I kept asking people, have you ever heard of a toe reader? And they were like, no. So it was a 6-month, once a month class that I took. And it's using the same sort of things, but you can actually look at somebody's feet and tell them a lot about what's happened to them.
Okay.
So it's really looking at the lines on the feet. So, like people look at hands or palms. It's the same thing, how your toes are, and they change, which at the time I thought, I've got very tiny little toe, but you can actually get it to like straighten out. And it's all about, again, meridians, what's flowing in and out. We actually had the opportunity to do some reading on somebody's grandchildren. And that was fascinating, finding out afterwards what was going on with the kids. Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, so tell people how they can find you.
So I'm all the, as everybody told me, I'm the East Coast Dragon Lady at gmail.com, or my website is www.eastcoastdragonlady.com.
Very easy and yes. And beautiful website. Good job,
yes.
Nancy.
And all of the, Facebook, all of that, you just hit that and it will take you to my Facebook page to, you can still join so I still have my private group where I usually do a dragon card or a dragon message each day. I'm having challenges with that recently. Like I've recorded something and it's disappeared. So then I will put a card up, or if I'm busy at work, then it's a card, but something goes up each day. And yes, it's easy to find me.
Yes.
And and there's also the Dragon Thunder is on the website. So if you're interested in that, or if you sign up for it, it's all free. You'll get the recording will be there afterwards as well. So
perfect. Well, Barbara, thank you so much for being on. And yes, and definitely we'll check in 6 months from now and see what else
has happened. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
For those watching, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Connection to the Cosmos. Aloha.
Thank you.